The kitchen exhaust fan wheezed above me, struggling against the thick August heat that turned the diner's back room into a sauna. My fingers ached as I scrubbed at the grease-crusted grill, the steel wool leaving angry red marks across my palms. It was nearly midnight, and I'd been on my feet for 14 hours straight, the double shift blurring into a haze of coffee orders and forced smiles. I was invisible here. That's what I'd learned after 3 months at Lucky's Diner, a 24-hour establishment on the edge of the city, where the desperate came to eat at ungodly hours. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow that made my reflection in the stainless steel look ghostly, hollow, like I was disappearing even from myself. "Table 6 needs a refill," Marco barked from the window, his voice cutting through my exhaustion. I nodded without looking up, wiping my hands on the apron that had once been white, but now bore the stains of countless shifts. My lower back screamed in protest as I straightened, grabbing the coffee pot from the warmer. The diner was nearly empty, just the usual scattered souls seeking refuge from their own lives. An elderly man hunched over yesterday's newspaper, a truck driver nursing his third cup. And then there was table 6. I'd noticed them when they arrived an hour ago. It was impossible not to. 3 men in suits that probably cost more than my annual rent, seated in the corner booth like they owned the place. But it wasn't them that made my pulse quicken. It was him. He sat with his back to the wall, a position that gave him a clear view of both exits. Even seated, I could tell he was tall, his shoulders broad beneath a charcoal suit that fit like it had been sewn onto his body. Dark hair, touched with silver at the temples, a face carved from marble, all sharp angles and controlled power. He hadn't touched his coffee, hadn't touched anything. He just sat there, perfectly still, while his companions spoke in low voices I couldn't quite hear, but it was his eyes that caught me. Dark. Calculating. They swept the room with the kind of awareness that suggested he was cataloging every exit, every potential threat, every breathing soul. When they landed on me, I felt it like a physical touch, a weight that made my breath catch. I approached their table with the coffee pot, keeping my eyes down. Professional. Invisible. "More coffee, gentlemen." My voice came out steadier than I felt. The 2 men on either side fell silent immediately. The one on the left, broad-shouldered, with a scar cutting through his eyebrow, shifted slightly, his hand moving toward his jacket in a way that made my survival instincts scream. But the man in the middle, the one whose presence seemed to consume all the oxygen in the room, raised one hand in a gesture so subtle it was barely there. Everything stopped. "Please." His voice was low, textured like expensive whiskey. Controlled, the kind of voice that didn't need volume to command attention. I poured, hyper-aware of my shaking hands, praying I wouldn't spill. The coffee streamed into his cup, steam rising between us, carrying the bitter scent of overbrewed beans. I could feel him watching me, studying me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "Thank you." He paused, his eyes dropping to my name tag, Emma. The way he said my name, like he was tasting it, memorizing it, sent a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the industrial air conditioning finally kicking on. "You're welcome," I managed, stepping back, professional distance, safe distance. I was turning away when it happened. My shoe, the left one, with the sole that had been separating for weeks, caught on the worn linoleum. I stumbled, the coffee pot tilting, and time seemed to slow as I watched the dark liquid arc through the air toward his pristine suit. My hands shot out instinctively, and somehow, impossibly, I caught myself against the edge of the table. The coffee pot crashed onto the surface, splattering across the formica but missing him entirely. But in my desperate grab for balance, my palm landed on something that wasn't the table. Papers. Documents spread across the booth seat beside him, previously hidden by the shadows and the angle of my approach. I yanked my hand back like I'd been burned, but not before I saw them. Not before my brain, exhausted and running on fumes, registered what was there. Photographs, blueprints, names I recognized from news reports about ongoing investigations. And in the center, a document with a header that made my blood run cold. Romano Family Asset Liquidation Protocol. The temperature in the diner seemed to drop 20 degrees. I looked up, meeting his eyes, and found something there that hadn't been before. Not anger. Something far more dangerous. Assessment. Calculation. The look of a man determining whether I was a problem that needed to be solved. "I'm so sorry," I breathed, grabbing napkins with trembling hands, trying to mop up the spilled coffee while deliberately not looking at the papers again. "I'm so clumsy. I'll clean this up right away. It's all right." His voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath now. He gathered the documents with movements that were too smooth, too practiced, sliding them into a leather portfolio that appeared from nowhere. Accidents happen. But the way he said accidents, like the word had quotation marks around it, like he didn't quite believe in their existence, made my stomach knot. The scarred man had half risen from his seat, his jacket falling open just enough for me to see the shoulder holster underneath. My mouth went dry. Vince. Again, that single word from the man in the middle, a command wrapped in silk. Vince sat back down, but his eyes never left me, cold and evaluating. "I really am sorry," I repeated, backing away with the empty coffee pot clutched against my chest like a shield. "I'll get you a fresh cup." "That won't be necessary." He pulled out a wallet, leather, expensive, monogrammed with initials I couldn't quite see, and placed several bills on the table. Far too many for 3 cups of coffee. "Keep the change." They stood in unison, moving with a synchronization that spoke of years working together. The man in the middle buttoned his suit jacket with one hand, the gesture elegant and deliberate. Up close, I could smell his cologne, something dark and woody, cedar and smoke, expensive enough that it probably didn't come in a bottle you could buy in stores. He paused beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell that intoxicating scent mixed with something else. Danger. Power. The kind that didn't need to announce itself. "Emma." My name again, but different this time. A promise or a threat, I couldn't tell which. "Be more careful. These floors can be treacherous." Then they were gone, moving toward the exit where a black SUV materialized at the curb as if summoned by thought alone. The windows were tinted so dark they looked like portals to nowhere. A driver emerged, another suit, another set of watchful eyes, opening the rear door with the kind of deference usually reserved for royalty. I stood frozen, the coffee pot still pressed against my racing heart, watching through the diner's grimy windows as they disappeared into the vehicle. It pulled away smoothly, followed immediately by a second identical SUV that had been idling half a block down. Security. Backup. The kind of precautions that regular businessmen didn't take. "Emma!" Marco's voice snapped me back. "Table 4 is waiting." I moved mechanically through the rest of my shift, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying those few seconds over and over. The documents, the names, the way they'd all deferred to him with a kind of fear masked as respect. Romano family. I knew that name. Everyone in the city knew that name, even if we pretended not to. They were mentioned in whispered conversations, in news reports that used careful language like alleged and rumored ties to organized crime. The kind of family that owned half the city without ever appearing on a deed. The kind that made people disappear when they became inconvenient, and I'd just seen their private documents. By the time my shift ended at 6 a.m., the sun was beginning to paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. I walked home through streets that were just beginning to wake, every shadow making me jump, every car that slowed making my pulse spike. My studio apartment was a 20-minute walk, and I'd never felt more exposed. Inside, I triple-locked the door and stood with my back pressed against it, trying to convince myself I was being paranoid. He'd said it was fine, just an accident. They'd left a generous tip and walked away. That was the end of it. Except I couldn't shake the feeling of those dark eyes on me, the weight of his attention, the way he'd said my name like he was filing it away for future use. I was being ridiculous. I was nobody. A waitress who'd stumbled at the wrong moment. In a week, he wouldn't even remember my face. I almost believed it. I managed 3 hours of fitful sleep before my phone alarm dragged me back to consciousness. Another shift started at 2 p.m. I showered in water that never quite got hot enough, pulled my hair back into the same ponytail I wore every day, and tried to ignore the dark circles under my eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. The walk back to the diner felt different in daylight. The city looked almost innocent, the dangers of the previous night dissolved in sunshine, and the sounds of normal life. I was being paranoid. Everything was fine. Marco was behind the counter when I arrived, but his usual scowl was replaced by something else. Nervousness. His eyes kept darting to the back corner booth, table 6, where a man sat alone. Not him. One of the others from last night, Vince, the scarred one. My feet stopped moving. "He asked for you," Marco said quietly, and there was something in his voice I'd never heard before. Fear. By name. The diner suddenly felt too small, too hot, the walls closing in. Vince watched me with those cold, evaluating eyes, and when he gestured to the seat across from him, it wasn't a request. I walked over on legs that felt disconnected from my body, every instinct screaming at me to run. But where would I go? If they knew my name, knew where I worked, they could find me anywhere. Sit. Not a request. A command. I sat. He slid something across the table, a phone. Expensive, sleek, still in its box. "Mr. Romano wanted you to have this." His voice was rough, like gravel and cigarettes. "His number's programmed in. You're to keep it on you at all times. I don't understand. You saw something last night, something you shouldn't have." He leaned forward, and I could smell coffee and danger on his breath. "That makes you either a liability or an asset, Mr. Romano hasn't decided which yet." My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the edge of the table. "I won't say anything. I didn't see anything. I don't even remember. Don't lie." The words cracked like a whip. "Mr. Romano appreciates many things, but dishonesty isn't one of them. You saw. He knows you saw. What matters now is what you do next." He stood, buttoning his jacket in a gesture that mirrored his boss from the night before. "Keep the phone on. When he calls, you answer. Immediately. And if I don't?" The smile that crossed his face was terrifying in its emptiness. "Then you become the kind of problem that gets solved. Permanently." He walked out, leaving me alone with the boxed phone and the understanding that my life as I knew it had just ended. The phone rang for the first time 3 hours later. I stared at the screen, watching it light up with an unknown number. My heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might crack bone. The phone felt like a live grenade in my palm, hot and dangerous. Around me, the diner hummed with its usual afternoon crowd. The clatter of dishes, the hiss of the grill, voices blending into white noise. But all I could hear was that relentless ringing. On the 4th ring, I remembered Vince's words, immediately. My thumb trembled as I swiped to answer. "Hello?" Silence. Just breathing on the other end, steady and controlled, while mine came in short, panicked bursts. Then, "Emma!" That voice again, smooth and dark, wrapping around my name like smoke. "You kept me waiting. I'm sorry, I caught myself, swallowing the excuse. I'm here now." "Good." A pause, and I could hear something in the background. Traffic, maybe? Or was that music? "You finish at 10 tonight? How did he know my schedule?" "Yes." "A car will pick you up. Don't make plans." It wasn't a question. I can't just... The words tangled on my tongue. What was I supposed to say? That I had a life? We both knew that was a lie. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere we can talk, privately." Another pause, heavier this time. "You're afraid." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "Yes, good. Fear keeps people honest." I could hear the smile in his voice, though whether it was meant to comfort or threaten, I couldn't tell. 10 o'clock, Emma. Don't disappoint me." The line went dead. I made it through my shift on autopilot, my hands performing tasks my brain barely registered. Pour coffee. Take orders. Smile. Repeat. But every time the door opened, my pulse spiked. Every dark sedan that passed the window made my stomach clench. Marco noticed. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. If only it were that simple. Ghosts I could handle." This was something far more dangerous. A man who existed in the spaces between legal and lethal, who moved through the city like he owned it, because, in all the ways that mattered, he did. At 9:47 p.m., I untied my apron with fingers that wouldn't stop shaking. I'd changed into the only decent clothes I owned. A simple black dress that had seen better days. Tights that hid the bruises on my shins from constantly bumping into table corners. In the bathroom mirror, I looked pale, terrified. Exactly like what I was, prey. The SUV was already waiting when I stepped outside at precisely 10 o'clock. The same one from last night, idling at the curb with its engine purring like a contented predator. The rear window rolled down and there he was. "Get in, Emma." I should have run. Should have flagged down a cab, called the police, done anything except climb into that vehicle. But Vince's words echoed in my head. The kind of problem that gets solved, and I knew with absolute certainty that running would only delay the inevitable. The interior smelled like leather, and that cologne I couldn't forget. He sat in the back corner, the streetlights cutting across his face in harsh angles. Up close, I could see details I'd missed before, a small scar near his left eye, the kind that suggested violence in his past. The way his hands rested on his knees, relaxed but ready, like a coiled spring. "Mr. Romano," I started, but he raised one hand. "Dante." The correction was firm. "When we're alone, you call me Dante." The door locks engaged with a soft click that sounded deafening. The driver pulled away from the curb smoothly, and I watched the diner disappear behind us, along with any illusion of safety. "Where are we going?" My voice came out smaller than I wanted. "I told you. Somewhere private." He shifted slightly, angling toward me, and the movement brought him close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "You're frightened of me. You're frightening." A smile ghosted across his lips. The first real expression I'd seen from him. "Honest, I appreciate that." He reached into his jacket, and every muscle in my body went rigid. But what he pulled out wasn't a weapon, it was a photograph. He handed it to me, watching my face carefully. The image showed a man, maybe mid-30s, handsome in a rough way, with dark hair and a cocky smile. He was leaning against a car, laughing at something off camera. "Do you know him?" Dante asked. I studied the photo, searching for any hint of recognition, but found none. "No. Should I?" His name was Marcus Chen. He worked for me. The past tense sent ice down my spine. 3 months ago, he disappeared with $2 million and a ledger containing information that could destroy everything I've built. I looked up from the photograph, meeting those dark eyes. "What does this have to do with me?" "The documents you saw last night, those were tracking reports. We finally found him." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Or rather, we found where he was buried. Someone got to him first. Killed him, took the money and the ledger, and left his body in a warehouse on the south side." My mouth went dry. "I still don't understand. The warehouse belongs to your father." The world tilted. My father. A name I hadn't spoken in years. A man who disappeared from my life when I was 12, leaving nothing but debts and broken promises. My father's been gone for 8 years. I don't even know if he's alive. He's alive. Dante's voice was certain, final. And he's been very busy, running a profitable little operation out of that warehouse. Drugs, stolen goods, the occasional murder for hire. He leaned closer, and I could smell cedar and smoke and something darker underneath. "Your father killed my associate, Emma. Stole from me. Made himself my enemy." Terror crystallized into something sharp and bright in my chest. "I haven't seen him since I was a kid. I don't know anything about his business, I swear. I know." He reached out, and I flinched, but his hand merely brushed a strand of hair from my face, the gesture almost tender despite the calluses on his fingers. "You're not like him. I had you investigated the moment I learned your name. You work 2 jobs, send money to your sick mother every month even though you can barely afford to eat. You're honest to a fault." His thumb traced along my jaw, tipping my face up to meet his gaze. "That's why I'm giving you a choice." "What choice?" The words came out as a whisper. "Your father has something I want. The ledger, and what's left of my money. You're going to help me get it back. I told you I don't know where he is. But he knows where you are." Dante's hand fell away, leaving cold spots where his skin had touched mine. Men like your father, they keep tabs on their vulnerabilities. Family is always the easiest pressure point. He pulled out another phone, his own this time, and showed me a series of photographs that made my stomach turn. My apartment, me walking to work, me visiting my mother at the care facility across town. Every moment of my life, documented and cataloged. He's been watching you for months, Dante continued, his voice matter-of-fact despite the horror he was presenting. Probably as insurance, in case he ever needed leverage, which means he'll reach out eventually, especially now that he knows he has a target on his back. You want to use me as bait. The realization was bitter on my tongue. I want to give you a chance to survive this. He pocketed the phone. Your father made you part of this the moment he chose that warehouse. The moment he took what was mine. Now you have two options. Work with me, help me recover what's mine, and walk away from this alive and compensated for your trouble. Or... He let the word hang in the air like a blade. Or what? Or I assume you're complicit in your father's theft, an accomplice, and I treat you accordingly. His eyes had gone cold again, all traces of that brief softness vanished. I don't make threats, Emma. I make promises. And I promise you, if you refuse to help me, you'll wish you'd never seen those documents. The SUV had been circling the city while we talked, but now it pulled to a stop. I looked out the window and felt my heart sink. We were parked outside my building. Think about it, Dante said, reaching past me to open the door. His arm brushed against mine, and even through my coat, I could feel the solid muscle beneath his suit. But don't think too long. Your father's circle is closing. When he runs, he'll come for you. The only question is whether you'll be ready. I stumbled out onto the sidewalk, my legs unsteady. The cool night air hit my face, clearing some of the fog from my brain. I turned back to look at him, this man who'd crashed into my life like a meteor, leaving nothing but craters. What if I go to the police? I asked, though we both knew it was an empty question. His smile was almost pitying. With what evidence? The documents you saw for less than 3 seconds? Your testimony about a conversation that never officially happened? He leaned forward into the light. I own half the police force, Emma. The other half looks the other way because they're smart enough to know when they're outmatched. No one's coming to save you from this. Your only ally in this situation is me. The door closed, and the SUV pulled away, leaving me standing alone on the empty street. I looked up at my building, a rundown walk-up in a neighborhood where gunshots were as common as car alarms. Everything looked the same as it had this morning, but I knew with crushing certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. I climbed the stairs in a daze, fumbled with my keys, and locked myself inside. The apartment felt smaller than usual, the walls pressing in. I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized myself. Same tired eyes, same too thin face, but there was something new there now, a trapped look. The expression of a bird who'd just realized the cage door had closed. The phone Dante had given me sat on my counter, silent and menacing. I picked it up, scrolling through the contacts. There was only one number saved, D. Before I could second-guess myself, I opened the messages and typed, "How do I know you won't kill me anyway?" The response came within seconds. "You don't. But I don't kill without reason. Give me a reason to trust you, and you'll live through this. Betray me, and you won't." I stared at the screen, reading and rereading those words. Then, why me? You could use anyone as bait. This time the pause was longer. I watched the 3 dots appear and disappear several times before his response came through, because when you saw those documents, you were terrified. Not for yourself. For me. I saw it in your eyes, worry that you'd gotten me in trouble. Most people's first instinct is self-preservation. Yours was concern for a stranger. Another message followed immediately. That kind of heart is rare in my world. I won't waste it. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I didn't. I set the phone down and walked to my window, looking out at the city lights stretching to the horizon. Somewhere out there was my father, a man I barely remembered but who apparently remembered me enough to watch, to wait, to keep me cataloged among his potential assets. And somewhere out there was Dante Romano, A man whose very name made hardened criminals nervous, who moved through the world with the certainty of someone who'd never been told no, and survived to enforce the lesson. I was caught between them, two predators circling the same territory, and I was the contested ground. Sleep didn't come that night. I lay in bed, listening to every creak of the building, every footstep in the hallway, my hand wrapped around the phone like it was a lifeline instead of a leash. When dawn finally crept through my curtains, painting everything in shades of gray, I hadn't reached any conclusions. I just knew that doing nothing wasn't an option. The phone rang at 6:47 a.m. I answered on the first ring this time. Yes, there's a coffee shop 2 blocks north of your building. Dante's voice was brisk, businesslike. Be there in 20 minutes. I have work. I called Marco. You have the day off. Paid. Before I could process that, he added, wear something comfortable. We have a lot to discuss. He hung up. 19 minutes later, I pushed open the door to Café Noir, a small French place that I'd walked past 100 times but never had the money to enter. The smell of fresh pastries and real coffee, not the burned swill from the diner, washed over me. The cafe was nearly empty, just a few early risers hidden behind newspapers and laptops. Dante sat at a corner table, positioned with his back to the wall and a clear view of both exits. A habit, I was beginning to realize. The survival instinct of someone who'd made too many enemies to ever truly relax. He stood when he saw me, a gesture of manners that seemed incongruous with everything else about him. Today he wore a different suit, navy this time, equally expensive, and his hair was slightly damp, like he'd recently showered. He looked rested, powerful, completely in control, while I felt like something the cat had dragged in. Sit. He gestured to the chair across from him. Have you eaten? I'm not hungry. That's not what I asked. He raised one hand, and a server materialized instantly, the kind of immediate service that money and reputation bought. 2 espressos, the breakfast special twice, and he looked at me. Do you like croissants? I nodded, too overwhelmed to argue. A basket of your fresh croissants as well? The server scurried away, and Dante's attention returned to me, heavy and unwavering. You look terrible. I didn't sleep. Understandable. He reached into the leather portfolio beside him, the same one from that first night, and pulled out a folder. I'm going to tell you things now. Things that, if shared with the wrong people, would get both of us killed. The fact that I'm willing to share them should tell you something. That you trust me? I asked, doubtful. That I'm invested in keeping you alive. He slid the folder across the table. Your father's real name is William Chen. He changed it to William Cross after he left you and your mother. He's been working in organized crime for the past decade, climbing ranks, making connections. Smart, ruthless, but ultimately greedy. That's what got Marcus killed. Marcus was his nephew, your cousin, though I doubt you ever met him. I opened the folder with shaking hands. Inside were surveillance photos of a man who looked vaguely familiar in the way that childhood memories are familiar. Older, harder, but I could see traces of the father I remembered in the set of his jaw, the way he carried himself. Marcus got ambitious, Dante continued as our coffee arrived. Thought he could steal from me and get away with it. He went to your father for help hiding. Your father helped, all right, helped himself to my money and the ledger. Then killed Marcus to tie up loose ends. Classic. Why are you telling me this? I wrapped my hands around the espresso cup, seeking warmth despite the cafe's heating, because you need to understand what kind of man your father is. When he reaches out to you, and he will, you need to be prepared for him to use every emotional manipulation in his arsenal. He'll appeal to blood, to family loyalty, to the little girl who waited for a daddy who never came home. Dante's voice was gentle but firm, like he was explaining a hard truth to a child. None of that is real. To him, you're a tool, leverage. The moment you're no longer useful, you're expendable. And to you? I met his eyes. What am I to you? Something flickered in his expression, too quick to name. A means to an end, for now. He took a sip of his espresso, watching me over the rim. But I keep my tools sharp and well-maintained. You help me, I'll make sure you're protected. More than that, I'll make sure you're compensated enough to get your mother into a proper facility. One where they don't ignore her calls, or leave her waiting for medication. My breath caught. How do you? I know everything, Emma. Not a boast. A fact. Including that the care facility she's in now is slowly killing her through negligence. I can fix that. Today, if you want. One phone call, and she's transferred to the best neurological center in the state. Private room, round-the-clock care, the treatment she actually needs. He leaned forward. All you have to do is trust me. It was manipulation. I knew it was manipulation. But the image of my mother, confused, scared, crying on the phone about nurses who didn't come when she called, made the decision easier than it should have been. What do you need me to do? Dante's smile was slow, satisfied, like a chess player who just trapped his opponent's queen. For now, just live your life, go to work, visit your mother, maintain your routine, but keep that phone on you always. When your father reaches out, you tell me immediately, every word, every detail. And when the time comes, he paused, his expression hardening. When the time comes, you'll help me set the trap that brings him in. You're going to kill him. Not a question. Only if he makes it necessary. Dante sat back as our food arrived. A spread that probably cost more than I made in a week. I'm a businessman, Emma. Death is messy, expensive, and draws attention. I prefer solutions that allow everyone to walk away breathing, if not necessarily whole. He picked up his fork. But make no mistake, I will have what's mine, one way or another. We ate in silence, and I tried to ignore how surreal this was. Sitting in a cafe with a mob boss, discussing my father's probable murder over croissants and espresso. This wasn't my life, couldn't be my life, but the phone in my pocket said otherwise. The folder full of surveillance photos said otherwise. The way Dante looked at me, with a mixture of assessment and something else I couldn't quite name, said otherwise. My life had become a noir film, and I was the unwitting femme fatale, caught between two men who played games with lives as casually as other people played cards. I just hoped I'd survive long enough to see how it ended. 3 weeks passed in a strange limbo where my life split into two distinct realities. During the day, I was still Emma Cross, waitress and nobody, serving coffee and pretending everything was normal. But underneath that facade, I'd become someone else entirely. A player in a game I didn't understand, waiting for a father I barely remembered to make contact. True to his word, Dante had my mother transferred. I visited her on a Tuesday afternoon, walking into a facility so different from the previous one that I almost cried in the lobby. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows. The air smelled like vanilla and cleanliness instead of disinfectant and despair. A nurse greeted me by name, already familiar with my mother's case, her medications, her fears. My mother looked better too, clear-eyed, calm, her hair washed and styled instead of matted and forgotten. When she saw me, she smiled, actually smiled, and knew who I was. Emma, sweetheart. Her voice was stronger than I'd heard in months. You didn't have to come all this way. I held her hand, feeling the bones beneath paper-thin skin, and wanted to weep. I wanted to. How are you feeling? Like myself again. She squeezed my fingers. The doctor here, Dr. Reeves, she's wonderful. She actually listens. And they have art therapy and music and... She paused, confusion flickering across her face. How are we paying for this? I know your insurance doesn't... Don't worry about it, Mom. I kept my voice light, swallowing the guilt. I got a raise. Everything's fine. The lie tasted like ash, but what was I supposed to say? A mobster is paying for your care in exchange for me helping him trap and possibly kill the man who abandoned us. When I left 2 hours later, the phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Dante. She looks better. You did the right thing. I stared at the message, unnerved. Are you watching me? Always. Get used to it. The possessiveness in those 2 words should have terrified me. Instead, it settled over me like a heavy blanket, suffocating, but strangely warm. I was being watched, tracked, controlled, but for the first time in years, I wasn't alone in carrying my burdens. That realization should have scared me more than it did. My shifts at the diner continued, but now Dante's men were always nearby, never obvious, never threatening, but present. The man reading a newspaper by the window for 3 hours without ordering food. The couple in the corner booth, who never quite looked at each other. Vince himself showed up twice, sitting at table 6 like a dark omen, his scarred face a reminder of what world I'd stumbled into. On the 4th week, Marco pulled me aside during a lull. "Emma, those guys who keep coming in, you in some kind of trouble?" "No." The lie came easier now. "They're just regulars. Regulars don't tip $50 on a $5 tab." He lowered his voice. "And they don't all have guns under their jackets. I've been around enough to know hired muscle when I see it." I met his eyes, seeing genuine concern there. Marco was a good man, for all his gruffness. He didn't deserve to get caught in whatever was coming. "Marco, if anyone comes in asking about me, anyone who isn't one of the regulars, you don't know anything. You haven't seen anything, okay?" His face paled. "Jesus, Emma. Please, just please." He nodded slowly, and I saw him mentally calculating how quickly he could find a replacement waitress. I didn't blame him. The call from my father came on a Friday night at 11:47 p.m. I was in my apartment, halfway through a shower, when the phone I'd left on the bathroom counter lit up with an unknown number. Not the phone Dante had given me, my personal phone, the one whose number I'd never changed, even though I'd moved 3 times since my father left. Water still streaming down my back, I grabbed a towel and stared at the screen, my heart threatening to crack my ribs. 8 years of silence, and now this. I answered with shaking hands. "Hello," breathing on the other end. Heavy, labored, like someone who'd been running. Then, "Emma, baby girl, is that really you?" His voice punched through me, deeper than I remembered, roughened by cigarettes and time, but unmistakable. My father. The man who'd left without explanation, without goodbye, without ever looking back. Dad? The word felt foreign on my tongue. "Oh, sweetheart. God, you sound so grown up." A laugh that bordered on manic. "I know I don't have the right to call. I know I don't deserve to hear your voice, but I'm in trouble, baby. Real trouble. And you're the only person I can trust." The irony would have been funny if my entire body wasn't trembling. I grabbed Dante's phone with my free hand, typing quickly with one thumb. "He's calling. Now." The response was immediate. "Put him on speaker. Record everything. Keep him talking." I fumbled with the settings, nearly dropping both phones in my panic. "Dad, what kind of trouble?" "The kind that gets people killed." Background noise filtered through, traffic, voices, the hollow echo of a large space. A train station, maybe, or a bus terminal. I did something stupid, Emma. Took something from someone I shouldn't have. And now they're after me. They'll hurt anyone connected to me. That includes you. My laugh was bitter. "You've been gone 8 years. I'm not connected to you. Blood is always a connection, baby girl." His voice cracked. "These aren't good people. They won't care that you haven't seen me since you were a kid. They'll use you to get to me. I couldn't let that happen without warning you." "Who are these people?" I asked, though I already knew. "The Romanos." He spat the name like poison. Dante Romano, specifically. He's a monster, Emma. A killer. He runs this city like his personal kingdom, and anyone who crosses him disappears. I made the mistake of crossing him, and now... A sound in the background, sharp and sudden, made him cut off. "I have to go. I just needed to hear your voice, needed to know you're okay. Wait." The desperation in my voice wasn't entirely faked. "Where are you? How can I help?" "You can't. Just... be careful, baby. If any of Romano's people approach you, run. Don't trust them. Don't trust anything they say. They'll use you to get to me, and they won't care if you get hurt in the process. Dad, please. I love you, Emma. I always have. I'm sorry I wasn't there. Sorry for everything." His voice broke completely. "Goodbye, baby girl." The line went dead. I stood there, water from my hair dripping onto the floor, both phones clutched in my hands, and felt something crack open inside my chest. 8 years of abandonment, of questions, of wondering if I'd done something wrong to make him leave. And now this. A warning delivered too late, wrapped in apologies I didn't know how to accept. Dante's phone rang before I could process anything. I answered automatically. "Play it back." His voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear something underneath. Anger, barely leashed. I played the recording, watching the waveforms spike and fall as my father's voice filled the small bathroom. When it ended, silence stretched between us. "He's at Union Station," Dante finally said. "The acoustics are distinctive. He'll be trying to catch a train out of state. Probably west, Nevada or California. Somewhere he can disappear into the crowds. Are you going after him now?" I couldn't keep the tremor from my voice. "My men are already moving." A pause. "Are you all right?" The question surprised me. I don't know. He sounded scared. He should be. No sympathy in those words. He's a dead man walking. He just doesn't know it yet. "Dante..." I hesitated, unsure what I was even asking for. Mercy? Understanding? Some acknowledgement that this was my father we were discussing, however absent he'd been? "Emma." My name. Soft and dangerous. "Do you want me to lie to you? Tell you that I'm going to capture him and have a nice chat about returning my property? We both know how this ends. I know." And I did. I'd known from the moment Dante had shown me those first photos, but knowing and accepting were different things. It's just... he made his choices. Those choices have consequences. Dante's voice gentled slightly. "You're not responsible for what happens to him. You didn't create this situation." He did, years ago, when he decided his greed was worth more than his family. I understand. Do you? The question was sharp. Because I need to know right now if you're going to be a problem, if your loyalty to a man who abandoned you is going to compromise what we're doing here. No. The word came out stronger than I felt. He's not my father. Not really. He's just a voice on a phone, a ghost from a past I've spent years trying to forget. Good. Satisfaction colored his tone. "Stay where you are. I'm sending Vince to watch your building tonight. Just in case your father tries anything stupid." Like what? Like deciding that apologizing wasn't enough. Like thinking he can grab you and use you as a bargaining chip. Background noise filtered through, car engine, muffled voices. He was already in motion. "Get some rest, Emma. This will be over soon." He hung up before I could respond. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by my window, watching the street below, and sure enough, within 20 minutes, a black sedan pulled up across from my building. I couldn't see inside through the tinted windows, but I knew Vince was there, a predator standing guard, protecting me or ensuring I didn't run. Maybe both. Morning came gray and cold, the kind of October day that promised winter wasn't far behind. I dressed for my shift on autopilot, my mind replaying my father's words over and over. "I love you, Emma. I always have." But love wasn't enough to make him stay. Wasn't enough to make him call in 8 years. Wasn't enough to keep him from using me as his excuse for finally reaching out. Not to reconnect, but to warn me away from the consequences of his own actions. Dante was right. My father had made his choices. I wasn't responsible for them. The diner was quiet when I arrived. Just the breakfast stragglers and the early lunch crowd starting to trickle in. Marco gave me a look that was equal parts concern and resignation, but he didn't ask questions. Smart man. At 2:34 p.m., the door chimed, and every cell in my body went on alert. Not because of danger, because of presence. That particular weight in the air that signaled Dante had entered a space. He looked different today, still impeccably dressed, still radiating that controlled power. But there was something in his eyes, a darkness that hadn't been there before. Or maybe had always been there, and I was only now learning to see it. He didn't sit at table 6. He walked directly to me, where I stood behind the counter, frozen like a deer in headlights. "Come with me." Not a request. "I'm working." "Marco." Dante's gaze shifted to my boss, who'd gone pale. "Emma's taking the rest of the day off." "Paid." Marco nodded so fast I thought his head might detach. "Of course. No problem. Emma, go ahead." I untied my apron with numb fingers, following Dante outside to where the SUV waited. Vince stood by the door, his scarred face unreadable. When our eyes met, I saw something there that made my stomach drop. Pity. Inside the vehicle, Dante sat close enough that our legs touched. The contact felt deliberate, grounding, like he was reminding me that I was tethered to him now, for better or worse. "We found him," he said without preamble. "Your father. He was at Union Station like I thought. Tried to board a train to Los Angeles using a fake ID." A pause. "He's in one of my warehouses now." My mouth went dry. "Is he alive?" "For now." Dante turned to face me fully, and I could see the predator behind the civilized mask. "I'm giving you a choice, Emma, one I don't usually offer." "What choice?" "You can walk away from this, right now. I'll have you driven home, and you'll never hear about this again. Your mother stays in her facility. You keep your job. You go back to your life." His hand found mine, his fingers warm and rough. "Or you can come with me. See this through to the end. Look your father in the eye and decide for yourself what kind of man he really is." Why would I want to do that? Closure. The word was simple, but weighted. You've spent 8 years wondering, imagining scenarios where he had a good reason for leaving, building him up into something other than what he is. His grip tightened. "I'm offering you the truth, but be warned. The truth is rarely kind." The SUV was moving through the city, heading south toward the industrial district. I watched the buildings blur past, each mile taking me further from the life I'd known and deeper into a world I'd only glimpsed in shadows. I thought about my mother, finally getting the care she needed. About the money Dante had promised, enough to change everything. About the man on the phone last night, who'd sounded so sincere in his fear and apologies. But mostly, I thought about the 12-year-old girl who'd waited by the window every night for a year, convinced her father would come back, who'd made excuses for him, defended him to her crying mother, believed that love was enough. That girl deserved to know the truth. "I'm coming with you," I said. Dante's smile was slow, approving, and edged with something that might have been pride. "I knew you would." He released my hand, sitting back. "Fair warning, Emma. What you're about to see won't be pleasant. Your father isn't going to be the man you remember. And what I'm going to ask him to do, what I'm going to make him confess, it's going to hurt. I know. Do you?" He studied me with those dark, unreadable eyes. "Because once you step through those warehouse doors, there's no unknowing what you'll learn, no going back to comfortable ignorance." "I stopped being comfortable the moment I spilled coffee on your table," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. "I'm already too far in to turn back now." "Yes," Dante agreed softly. "You are." The warehouse loomed ahead, a hulking structure of rusted metal and broken windows. The SUV pulled around to a side entrance, where 2 more men waited, both armed, both watching the perimeter with the kind of alertness that suggested they expected trouble. Dante exited first, then extended his hand to help me out. The gesture was courtly, incongruous with our surroundings, but I took it anyway. His fingers wrapped around mine, strong and certain, and didn't let go. "Stay close to me," he murmured as we approached the entrance. "Don't speak unless I tell you to. And no matter what you see, no matter what he says, remember, he's had 8 years to reach out. 8 years to be a father. He chose not to. This is the consequence of that choice." I nodded, not trusting my voice. The warehouse door opened, and we stepped into my father's reckoning. The warehouse interior was cavernous and cold, lit by harsh fluorescent lights that cast everything in stark, unforgiving clarity. The air smelled of metal, oil, and something else. Fear, sharp and acrid, the scent of prey that knew the predator had arrived. My father was in the center of the space, tied to a metal chair that had been bolted to the concrete floor. Even from a distance, I could see the damage. His left eye swollen shut, blood dried at the corner of his mouth, his shirt torn and dirty. But he was alive, breathing heavily through his nose, his one good eye tracking our approach with something between terror and desperate hope. When he saw me, that hope crystallized into shock. "Emma? No. No. What did you do? What did you do to my daughter?" His voice cracked on the last word, and despite everything, I felt something twist in my chest. This was my father, broken, bloodied, but still the man who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd sung me to sleep when I had nightmares. Dante's hand tightened on mine, anchoring me. "I didn't do anything to her, William. She's here of her own choice." "Bullshit." My father struggled against his restraints, the chair scraping against concrete. You threatened her. Used her mother. Emma, sweetheart, don't listen to him. Whatever he told you, it's lies. I can explain everything. Then explain. Dante's voice was cold, clinical. He released my hand and walked in a slow circle around my father, predatory and patient. Explain why you helped your nephew steal $2 million from me. Explain why you killed him when he outlived his usefulness. Explain why you've been watching your daughter for months, cataloging her movements, preparing to use her as leverage if you got caught. That's not... I wasn't... My father's protests died as Dante pulled out his phone, swiping to a series of photos. The same ones he'd shown me walking to work, visiting my mother, my building, my schedule, my entire life documented and filed away. These were found in your apartment, Dante continued, holding the phone close enough for my father to see, along with detailed notes about Emma's routines, her vulnerabilities, her pressure points. You weren't protecting her from me, William. You were preparing to use her against me. No. My father's voice broke. No, I would never. Emma, you have to believe me. I was trying to protect you. Everything I did was to protect you. I stepped forward, Dante's warning about staying quiet forgotten. Protect me from what? From you. Because you're the only danger I've faced in 8 years. My father's good eye found mine, and I saw genuine pain there, or maybe just genuine regret at being caught. Baby girl, you don't understand. The world I'm in, the things I've done, I left to keep you and your mother safe. To keep you away from all this. You left because you're a coward. The words surprised me with their venom. You left because staying meant facing consequences. Meant being a father instead of a criminal. Don't dress it up as protection. Emma, how much did you take? I asked, looking at Dante for confirmation. From him. How much? $2 million in cash, Dante supplied. Another $3 million in bearer bonds. And a ledger containing financial records that could implicate several high-ranking city officials, judges, and police commanders in my organization's operations. I turned back to my father. $5 million. You stole $5 million, killed your own nephew, and then thought what? That you could run? That there wouldn't be consequences? I thought I could disappear. His shout echoed through the warehouse. I thought I could take the money and vanish, start over somewhere they'd never find me. And I almost made it. I was so close. But you couldn't resist one last call, Dante said softly, dangerously. Had to warn your daughter. Had to play the concerned father one more time. That sentimentality cost you everything. My father sagged in the chair, the fight draining out of him. When he looked at me again, his face was pleading, desperate. Emma, please. I know I wasn't there for you. I know I failed you, but I'm still your father. Blood matters. Family matters. You can't let him kill me. Kill you! Dante laughed, the sound devoid of humor. William, I'm a businessman. Killing you would be a waste of resources and potential revenue. He gestured, and Vince appeared from the shadows carrying a laptop and a small device I didn't recognize. No. You're going to help me recover my property. You're going to tell me where you hid the money in the ledger. And then you're going to work for me, doing exactly what I tell you, for exactly as long as I decide you're useful. And if I refuse, Dante's smile was terrifying in its pleasantness, then I make an example out of you. Not a quick death, that would be mercy. No, I make it slow, painful, public enough that everyone in my organization understands what happens to thieves and traitors. He paused, letting the words sink in. And then I go after everyone you've ever cared about. Your ex-wife, still struggling in that care facility? How easy would it be for her medications to get mixed up? An accidental overdose, tragic but not suspicious. You bastard. And Emma. Dante's gaze slid to me, and I felt ice flood my veins. So smart, so hardworking, so determined to build a life for herself. It would be a shame if that life got complicated. If she found herself facing charges for aiding and abetting a known criminal. If every door she tried to open slammed in her face because her father's sins got attached to her name. He was bluffing. He had to be bluffing. but the look in his eyes, cold, calculating, absolutely serious, said otherwise. "Don't you dare touch her." My father's voice was raw, animal. "I'll do whatever you want. Just leave her alone. Then start talking." Dante nodded to Vince, who opened the laptop and set it on a crate nearby. Bank accounts, storage locations. Every detail of where you hid my money in that ledger. And William, if I find out you're lying, if even $1 is unaccounted for, the deal is off. My father talked. For the next hour, I stood there and listened as he laid out his crimes in meticulous detail, how Marcus had come to him with the plan to steal from Dante, how they'd worked together to siphon money over 6 months, small amounts that wouldn't be noticed immediately, how the ledger had been copied during a break-in at one of Dante's legitimate businesses, disguised as a simple robbery. And then how it had all fallen apart, Marcus getting greedy, demanding a bigger cut, threatening to go back to Dante with a deal, trading my father's involvement for leniency. My father making the decision that blood, even blood relation, was less important than survival. "I shot him in the back of the head," my father said, his voice flat, emotionless. "Quick. Clean." "He didn't suffer." "How merciful of you," Dante said dryly. "Continue." "The money was in 3 different locations, safety deposit boxes under false names, a storage unit in New Jersey, and buried in a state park upstate. The ledger was in a different location entirely, hidden in a church confessional in Queens, of all places. My father had scattered everything, creating a trail that would take time to follow, buying himself insurance in case he got caught. Smart. Calculated. The work of someone who'd spent years learning how to survive in the criminal underworld, not the man who'd read me bedtime stories and called me his baby girl. When he finished, Dante was quiet for a long moment, processing everything. Then he nodded to Vince, who began typing rapidly on the laptop, presumably dispatching teams to each location to verify the information. "You'll stay here while my people confirm everything you've said," Dante told my father. "If it all checks out, you live. You work for me, doing whatever I assign you for the next 10 years. You don't contact Emma or her mother. You don't try to run. You become a ghost to everyone except me and my organization, understood?" "And if I refuse?" my father asked, though we all knew he wouldn't. "Then I get creative." Dante's smile was a predator's warning. "And trust me, William, you don't want that." My father's shoulders slumped in defeat. "I understand." "Good." Dante turned to me, his expression softening slightly. "Emma, do you have anything you want to say to him?" I looked at my father, really looked at him, seeing not the ghost I'd built up in my memories, but the reality. A man who'd chosen crime over family, who'd killed his own nephew without hesitation, who'd planned to use me as a bargaining chip if necessary. Whatever love I'd carried for him, whatever hope that he'd had good reasons for leaving, died in that moment. "Goodbye, Dad," I said quietly. "I hope it was worth it." His face crumpled. "Emma, please." But I was already walking away, Dante's hand on the small of my back, guiding me toward the exit. Behind us, I could hear my father calling my name, his voice breaking with sobs that might have been genuine or might have been one more manipulation. I didn't look back. Outside, the afternoon sun felt too bright, too normal for what had just happened. I stood by the SUV, breathing in air that didn't smell like fear and betrayal, trying to process everything. Dante stood beside me, giving me space but staying close enough that I could feel his presence. Solid, real, constant in a way my father had never been. "Are you all right?" he asked after a moment. "I don't know." The honesty surprised me. I thought I'd feel something, grief maybe, or anger. But I just feel empty. That's normal. His hand found mine again, fingers interlacing in a gesture that was becoming familiar. "You just watched a fantasy die. The idea of who you thought he was, who you needed him to be. That kind of loss deserves mourning, even if the reality didn't deserve your love." I looked up at him, this man who'd crashed into my life and turned everything upside down, who'd threatened me and protected me in equal measure, who'd given my mother better care than I could ever afford, and then used my father's love for me as leverage. Why are you being kind to me? I asked. You got what you wanted. The money, the ledger, my father under your control. You don't need me anymore. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise maybe, or calculation. Is that what you think? That you were just a means to an end? Weren't I? He was quiet for a moment, studying my face like he was trying to memorize it. Then, slowly, deliberately, he raised his free hand and cupped my cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. Emma, if you were just a means to an end, I would have handled this very differently. I would have used you as bait, let your father grab you, and followed him to his hiding spot. Clean, efficient, with you as collateral damage. His touch gentled. Instead, I gave you choices, protected your mother, brought you here so you could see the truth for yourself instead of living with comfortable lies. Why? Because somewhere between that first night and now, you stopped being a tool and became— He paused, seeming to search for the right word. Someone I want to protect, someone who deserves better than the hand life dealt her. My breath caught. Dante. I'm not a good man, Emma. His voice was low, honest in a way that felt dangerous. I've done things that would horrify you. Hurt people who probably deserved better. Built an empire on fear and violence and calculated ruthlessness. But you— His thumb traced my jawline. You make me want to be better, or at least, to protect something better than myself. I should have been terrified. Should have recognized this for what it was. Obsession, possession, the dangerous fixation of a man who was used to taking what he wanted. But standing there, his hand warm against my skin, his eyes dark with something that might have been genuine emotion, I felt something else entirely. Safe. Seen. Valued. Maybe I was broken too. Maybe 3 weeks of living in his world had damaged something fundamental in my ability to recognize danger. Or maybe I'd been alone for so long that even dangerous affection felt better than none at all. What happens now? I asked. Now? I take you home. You rest. Tomorrow you go back to work, back to your life. His hand dropped, though his fingers stayed tangled with mine. And when you're ready, when you've processed everything that happened today, we talk about what comes next. What comes next? That depends on you. He opened the SUV door, helping me inside with that same courtly gesture. You can walk away, Emma. I meant what I said. You're free to leave. Your mother's taken care of. Your father's no longer a threat, and you've got enough money coming to start fresh wherever you want. He slid in beside me, close enough that our shoulders touched. The door closed, cocooning us in leather-scented privacy as the driver pulled away from the warehouse. Or, I prompted, or you stay. The words were simple, but weighted with possibility. You let me keep protecting you, keep taking care of you, and we see where this goes. This? You mean I couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't quite name what was happening between us. I mean that I've spent 3 weeks thinking about you constantly, about how you look in the morning when you think no one's watching, how you bite your lip when you're nervous. The way you stood up to me in that warehouse, defending a father who didn't deserve your loyalty. His voice dropped lower, more intimate. I want you, Emma. Not as a tool or an asset. As mine. The possessiveness should have terrified me. Instead, it sent heat flooding through my veins. I don't know how to be yours, I whispered. I don't know how any of this works. Neither do I. The admission was startling in its honesty. I've never wanted to keep someone before, never cared enough to try. But with you— He turned, his dark eyes finding mine. With you, I want to try. The SUV was heading back toward my neighborhood, the city sliding past the windows in a blur of lights and lives. Normal people living normal lives, unaware of the darkness that existed in the spaces between. I thought about my apartment, small and empty and safe. Thought about going back to serving coffee and pretending this had all been a strange dream. Thought about walking away from Dante Romano and everything he represented. Then I thought about his hand on my face. The way he'd given me choices when he could have just taken. How he'd protected my mother without being asked. The darkness in his eyes that somehow made me feel less alone in my own. I'm scared, I admitted. You should be. No false comfort, just honesty. I'm dangerous, Emma. My world is dangerous. Being close to me means accepting risks that most people spend their lives avoiding. But I'll keep you safe. From everyone except myself. His lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. And, even from myself, if you need me to be. The SUV pulled up to my building. Through the window I could see my apartment. 3rd floor, corner unit. The light I'd left on this morning still burning in the window. My old life, waiting for me to return to it. Or I could choose something else. Something darker, more dangerous, but infinitely less lonely. Dante made no move to stop me as I reached for the door handle. The choice is yours, Emma. It always will be. I paused, hand on the door, poised between two futures. Then I turned back to him, meeting those dark, dangerous eyes. If I stay, if I choose this, I need to know you won't lie to me. Whatever you are, whatever you do, I need the truth. Always. The promise was immediate, unequivocal. I'll give you honesty, even when it's ugly, even when you don't want to hear it. And my mother will have the best care money can buy for the rest of her life. You have my word. I studied his face, looking for deception, for manipulation, for any sign that this was just another game. But all I saw was intensity, focus, and something that might have been hope. Okay, I said, releasing the door handle. Okay, I'll stay. The smile that crossed his face was genuine, transforming him from dangerous to devastating. Thank you. For what? For trusting me. For choosing this. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear with surprising gentleness. For giving me the chance to prove I can be what you need. And what do I need? I asked, genuinely curious. Someone who sees you, who values you, who'll burn down the world before letting it hurt you again. His voice was low, fervent, almost reverent. Let me be that for you, Emma. Let me be yours the way I'm asking you to be mine. In the enclosed space of the SUV, with the city lights casting shadows across his face, Dante Romano looked almost human, almost vulnerable. A man asking for something he'd probably never asked for before. I leaned in, closing the distance between us, and pressed my lips to his in a kiss that was more promise than passion. His hand came up to cradle the back of my head, holding me gently, like I was something precious that might break. When we pulled apart, his eyes were molten, dark with want and something deeper. Come home with me, he murmured against my lips. Not to my place. Yours. Let me stay with you tonight. Just be with you. I nodded, unable to form words, and watched as he instructed the driver to park. Then his hand found mine again, and we walked into my building together, a mob boss and a waitress, bound by circumstances and choosing to make them into something more. In my small apartment, surrounded by my meager possessions, Dante Romano looked out of place and entirely right all at once. He shed his jacket, loosened his tie, and when he pulled me into his arms, it felt like coming home to a place I hadn't known I was searching for. We didn't talk about the future, didn't discuss logistics or plans or what shape this thing between us would take. We just existed together, two broken people finding unexpected comfort in each other's damage. And for the first time in 8 years, I didn't feel invisible anymore. 6 months later, I stood in front of a full-length mirror in a bedroom that still didn't quite feel like mine, despite living here for the past 4 months. The penthouse was all floor-to-ceiling windows and modern luxury, so different from my cramped studio that sometimes I still woke up disoriented, forgetting where I was. Then I'd feel Dante's arm around my waist, pulling me back against his chest, and remember exactly how my life had changed. You look beautiful. His voice came from the doorway, and I met his eyes in the mirror's reflection. He was already dressed, charcoal suit, silver tie, looking every inch the powerful man he was. But when he looked at me, his expression softened in that way it only did when we were alone. I looked terrified, I corrected, smoothing down the emerald dress he'd bought me for tonight. Your mother is going to hate me. My mother is going to love you. He crossed the room, his hands settling on my shoulders, and if she doesn't, she'll pretend to. Because she knows better than to question my choices. I leaned back against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. 6 months. And I still wasn't entirely used to this. The wealth, the power, the way people deferred to him with a mixture of fear and respect. But I'd learned to navigate it, found my footing in his world even as I kept one foot in my own. I still worked at the diner 2 days a week. Dante had offered to set me up with anything I wanted. A business, investments, a trust fund that would make me independently wealthy. But I'd refused. The diner kept me grounded, reminded me of who I was before all this. Plus, Marco's relief when I told him I wasn't quitting was almost comical. "How's your mother?" Dante asked, pressing a kiss to my temple. "Good. Great, actually." I smiled, thinking of my visit yesterday. Dr. Reeves says she's responding even better than expected to the new treatment protocol. She knew who I was the entire visit. Asked about you. What did you tell her? That you're kind to me. That you make me happy. I turned in his arms, looking up at him. That I love you. The words still felt new, despite having said them a month ago for the first time. Dante had gone very still when I'd whispered them in the dark, his hand tightening on mine. Then he'd kissed me like I was oxygen, and he was drowning, and whispered them back against my skin. "I love you too," he said now, cupping my face. More than I knew I was capable of loving anyone. The dinner with his family went better than I'd feared. His mother, elegant, sharp-eyed, missing nothing, studied me with the same intensity Dante had that first night. But by the end of the evening, she was holding my hand and telling me stories about Dante as a boy, much to his embarrassment. "She likes you," he said later as we drove home through the city. "She told me you have steel underneath that soft exterior. Coming from her, that's high praise. I think she just likes that I make you smile more." I laced my fingers through his. "Your cousin mentioned you've been different lately. Lighter. You've made me different." He brought my hand to his lips, better. The thought that had been circling in my mind for weeks finally found voice. What about my father? Dante's expression didn't change, but I felt him tense slightly. "What about him? You said 10 years. It's been 6 months. Is he still alive?" "Yes." Simple, direct. He's working off his debt in one of my shipping operations. Miami. He does what he's told, keeps his head down, and doesn't cause problems. "Do you think—" I hesitated, unsure if I even wanted the answer. "Do you think I should see him? Eventually?" Dante was quiet for a long moment, considering. "Do you want to?" "I don't know. Part of me feels like I should, like there's unfinished business." I watched the city lights blur past. But another part of me remembers him tied to that chair, and how easily he would have used me. And I think maybe some doors are better left closed. Then keep it closed. He squeezed my hand. "He made his choices, Emma. You don't owe him forgiveness or reconciliation. You don't owe him anything, except I do, in a weird way. If he hadn't stolen from you, if he hadn't called me that night, we never would have met. We would have met eventually." Dante's voice was certain. Maybe not the same way. Maybe not with all the drama and danger. But I believe we would have found each other somehow. I wanted to believe that too. Wanted to think that this, us, was more than just circumstance and coincidence. That we were inevitable, written in stars or fate or whatever force guided lives together. "Come away with me," Dante said suddenly. "Next month. 2 weeks, just us. Somewhere warm where no one knows my name and you can wear sundresses and forget that my world exists. Can you do that? Just disappear for 2 weeks? For you?" He smiled. "I can do anything." 3 weeks later, I stood on a beach in the Maldives, watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors. Dante came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist, and we stood there in comfortable silence as day surrendered to night. "I want to marry you," he said quietly, his lips against my ear. My heart stopped, then stuttered back to life. "What?" "Marry me, Emma." He turned me in his arms, and I saw he was serious. "Not now, not immediately. But someday, when you're ready. I want you to be my wife. I want everyone to know you're mine. And I'm yours." "Dante." Tears blurred my vision. "Are you sure? Your world, your family, they might expect you to marry someone from—" "I don't care what they expect." His voice was fierce. "I care about you, about us, about building a life with the only person who's ever made me want something beyond power and control. His thumb brushed away my tears. So I'm asking, even though I know it's too soon, even though we've only had 6 months, and there's still so much you don't know about my life, will you think about it? About forever with me? I looked at this man who'd entered my life through chaos and fear, who'd shown me darkness, but also protected me from it, who'd given me choices when he could have taken them away, who looked at me like I was something precious, something worth keeping safe. Yes, I whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. Someday. When we're ready. His kiss was gentle and devastating all at once, a promise sealed with salt air and sunset. When we pulled apart, he slipped a ring onto my finger. Not an engagement ring, he explained, but a promise. A placeholder until I was ready for forever. I love you, Emma Cross, he said, and the words wrapped around me like a blessing. I love you too, Dante Romano. We stayed on that beach until the stars came out, planning a future that seemed impossible and perfect all at once. A future where the waitress and the mob boss wrote their own ending, one that had nothing to do with how their story began. And as I fell asleep that night in his arms, listening to the waves and his steady heartbeat, I realized something profound. I'd spent so long being invisible that I'd forgotten what it felt like to be truly seen, to be chosen, to matter. Dante had given me that, had taken a girl who'd been overlooked and made her the center of his world. It wasn't the love story I'd imagined as a child. It was dangerous, complicated, built on a foundation of violence and power that I still didn't fully understand. But it was mine. We were building it together, one choice at a time, one day at a time, and that was enough. That was everything.